made a deal with me that if I went away to college and got a 4-year degree and decided after that that culinary school was what I wanted to do, then that was up to me.
Yeah, so I met this guy,
Yeah, so I met this guy.
and he's got some friends who are very,
Let's say interesting. He's got some friends who are very interesting. You should totally listen to this.
Hi, this is Harry, and Mark Hague is a very interesting fellow. Mark spent 37 years with the EPA here locally and retired as regional administrator. So, welcome to the podcast, Mark.
Thanks, Harry. Glad to be here.
Well, tell us a little about yourself and what journey brought you through your life to today.
Wow, there's a lot there, Harry, but I'll try to condense it down for your listeners' sake and yours as well. So, as you mentioned, I worked at the Environmental Protection Agency for about 37 years. I started as a student intern in Washington, D.C. back in 1980. And by hook or by crook, I found a way to stay on permanently at EPA after being a student intern. Worked in the DC area for about 9 or 10 years, and then point of wanting to start a family, we relocated from Washington, D.C. here to Kansas City. I grew up north of Kansas City in St. Joe, Missouri. Moved there when I was a young kid from Michigan, up about an hour north of Detroit. And the first thing that struck me was how hot the summers get here. Whew, a lot of heat and humidity we didn't have in Michigan. But anyway, my father was a game warden for the Fish and Wildlife Service, so he was always working in the outdoors and occasionally would drag the kids along on some of his outdoor adventures. And that's what really got me interested in the environment. So I pursued a degree in political science and public administration and used that as a way to get into environmental work. And it was kind of a fluke that I got at EPA. I accepted an unpaid internship at an environmental group in Washington, D.C. And out of the blue, a gentleman calls me and says, well, I've got an internship here at EPA. Well, I'd already accepted this other job. And he turned around and says, well, this job pays, and we'll pay you, and we can keep you on for 6 months at a paid internship. And if you're a good worker, maybe you even get a full-time job. It took me about a nanosecond to say, oh, okay, I'll let the other group know I'm not coming. So that was kind of my career in environmental protection, and EPA was a great place to work for a variety of reasons, just because all the work you do helps improve people's lives and their health and well-being and that of the environment. And you just felt connected to the work, and just a lot of fantastic scientists and engineers and legal experts. So there's just a great camaraderie. And then how I got to today is, as you and I both know, we're kind of interested in podcasting and getting information out there. And that led me to the class at Johnson County Community College. And it's really been a fun class to be in. I like the dynamic of people we have in our class. It just seems to be real interesting. And one way or the other, I've learned how to do some podcasting, editing and recording. So that's been great. I'm kind of semi-retired now. I work up at I run a social service agency for a church up in the Brookside area. And so run a food pantry and community garden. And that's what keeps me busy and active in my semi-retirement from my first career.
I hear you. Yeah, that's cool. So one of the things I like to ask my guests is, did you have any previously held beliefs that were shoved to the side or changed after you kind of learned your profession?
Throughout my career, one of the things I took away from it that I enjoyed the most was just empowering people and engaging them and creating an environment where they could be productive for the benefit of the organization and their own careers, and watching people advance. And so a lot of times, one of the things I really learned and came to appreciate was giving people some empowerment and ability to do their work and do it well. And the encouragement and support along the way can really, really be a powerful tool.
So, is there one main thing that you would like our listeners to know about you or your field?
Yeah, I'm going to be a little bit, since I retired from EPA, I've gotten involved in a group called the Environmental Protection Network, EPN. And it's a group that's really set up. There's been a lot of attempts in the past 8 or 10 years to kind of roll back a lot of basic environmental protections and policies. And I think the thing I'd like people to know and get a deeper appreciation for, and things that I'm committed to, is just working really hard to preserve the system of environmental protections that we have now, whether that's recognized by the work that people at EPA do, that I was involved in for so many years of my life, and a lot of work that's being done at state agencies who really help EPA carry out its environmental protection missions. And kind of related to that, but not in EPA's realm, is just the work that's done to protect public health. And I know both the environment and public health can sometimes be, proverbial third rail kind of topics to get into. But just, I really would ask your listeners and others to just take time to really learn what these professionals do to help keep our world safe, healthy, keep us all healthy, reduce the risks that we're exposed to every day. And that, a lot of these folks do that work very quietly and behind the scenes, and just kind of step away from the noise and see what the signal is that we're being sent by a lot of the hard work they do.
Well, good. I appreciate that. Yeah, and I hear where you're coming from. So, a little bit more about you. What is your favorite music genre?
Oh man, I knew that. So my first answer to your "What are your favorite things," Harry, was always going to be, "You're asking me to pick amongst my children," kind of thing. But I'm probably a generational thing. I kind of like the classic rock, kind of thing from the 70s and 80s. Even the 60s to some degree. I always like listening to covers of some of the songs I knew back in the day. Big fan of Neil Young, CSNY, Springsteen. Those are some of the popular. But, I was listening to a lot of music over the weekend, and, like the Dave Matthews Band, like a lot of the new stuff coming out. And then when I'm making dinner, I like to listen to some jazz. So it's just a nice way to kind of relax a little bit. So.
That's cool. That's cool. Is there any one song or piece of music or artist that really you hold at the top of the mountain?
I was listening to, and I don't quite know what motivated this, but I was looking for some music, and the one I like is Springsteen. Part of the reason I pick him out is a lot of the songs he talks about, and it's kind of the whole Jersey Shore kind of thing. But just talking about the struggles that were going on back in the 80s and 70s, and having come from parts of the country, or family members that were in parts of the country where steel mills and factories were being shut down, and people having a hard time finding their way through economic hardship. Some of those songs really resonate. Another one, I've got a friend who's going through some health issues, and the song "Glory Days," anytime we're kind of communicating, always comes up. He's a great guy, but he's still living the dream from his high school and college football days, kind of thing. And every time I hear that, I think of, I won't name his name, but I think of him thinking, yeah, every time I bump into him, there's some old sports story that comes up that usually is centered around his sports career, kind of thing.
I hear you. I hear you. Yeah.
The thing I liked about those was the storytelling aspect of it, and where people were at and hardships they were going through, and just kind of struggling to get by.
Yeah. So those guys could just tell a great story, and you could live the story with them, and it didn't take 200 or 300 pages of a book to read through. Yeah.
And a 3 minute and 57-second song, you can be like, yeah, I can relate to that. I know somebody who went through that situation.
Good song crafting. Yeah. What about books? Do you have a favorite kind of a read?
Oh gosh, yeah, that's an easy one. I love historical biographies. Pretty much anything about any president, I'm really excited to read about. Or major political figure. David McCullough's work has been really good. just a lot of those presidential historians. One of the first books I remember reading, even in high school, not the first book I read in high school, but was when there was the biography of Harry Truman that came out that was really popular. And that started me on reading just, anytime I hear about a good political leader, if not president, historical biography, I like digging into that. I've read the biographies of JFK and Bobby Kennedy, really enjoyed those. So I just, it's nice to read, and you go into, there's a whole trilogy of LBJ biographies that are just, by Robert Caro. I mean, and he's a very dense, very long reader. I mean, these are just deep, deep, deep books, but they're so enlightening. You get in and you get, being a public policy person, having worked in the government, kind of getting in behind the scenes and see what was really going on at the time and going through people's minds and what formed and shaped them, how that shaped their decision making. I really enjoy reading that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of content for you to relate with, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just a few years ago finished up the Ulysses Grant biography, and talk about two lives. I mean, the life he had before becoming the successful general that turned the tide in the Civil War, and then president. This was a conflicted man through most of his life, fighting a lot of demons.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So he liked the juice a little bit, and he would, even during the war, would just disappear for days on end and go on these huge benders, but then come back in a somewhat foggy state and like, okay, let's go attack. Was kind of this, and it just anyway, just points out that even some of the people we revere as great leaders, they're not unlike all of us, that they carry some demons with them.
Yeah, human as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
I love
exactly.
Winston Churchill. Yeah.
Yeah. Couldn't manage a buck. He was always running out of money and leaning on his friends to get more money.
Oh, I didn't know that either. See, I pick up all kinds of tidbits
Just a
from
bit
you
of
guys.
he just put a shekel, burn a hole in his pocket pretty quickly.
But he could sure twist a phrase.
Oh,
He
yes.
could sure speak. Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what about visual art? What do you like in visual art? Do you like painting, ceramics? What?
Yeah, again, it's a little bit of all of the above. I've liked some of the regionalist painters. Always been a fan of Thomas Hart Benton, one of our Kansas City native sons. Like some of his work, that kind of abstract piece. One thing I did, when I worked for the government, I traveled around the country a fair amount to, some of the major cities, New York, Boston, San Francisco, Denver, places like that. And if I had extra time, I always tried to go to an art museum in town just to see what they had. And, depending on what city you were at and what museum, you would have different artists that were kind of prominent in their display. I remember going into one museum and they just had a big collection of David Lichtenstein paintings, and I'll mangle whatever movement. So to me, it's just finding different forms of art and taking the time to kind of understand the artist and the times they were in and the movements that were going on. And there's a couple good impressionist museums in the Washington D.C. area and how they were trying to revolutionize some of the thinking about painting. Those kind of stories. I'm not one that's going to find the deeper meaning in some abstract painting, but kind of knowing what was going on in society at that time is always kind of fun for me to get into. I've got some family members that do pottery work, so I'm always kind of liking that as well.
Mm-hmm. It's cool to watch.
Yeah.
It's cool to watch the creative process happen.
Yeah. And I think for some of us, you've got your guitars up there. I wish I could play an instrument, So to me, there's some just joy in seeing other people being able to do things you can't do, and or could try to do, but it probably wouldn't come out as well. So
never too late to start, brother.
Yeah. Maybe when I retire, the next time I can do that.
There you go. Next time.
Yeah, right.
What about a little closer to home? What kind of foods do you like? What's your favorite food?
Oh gosh. I love to cook, first of all, so there's not much that I'm not willing to try. I told people once, I said, if it's not moving, I probably would be willing to give it a try. Kind of the basic homespun kind of meals I like to prepare. I'm always a fan of some barbecue from time to time. Love seafood. Love to try different, whether it be Mediterranean or classic American, those kind of things. All of that is really good. As I've said to people, there's not much food I've ever turned away, and if you saw me in person, you'd probably know why.
Okay, you were speaking about the past and all the biographies that you've read and the folks historical over the years. If there was one person that you could meet from history, who would that be?
Okay, so I got asked this question earlier, and it was a tough choice to make one. So what my idea was is having dinner with three people, and one I thought I'd really love to sit down and have dinner with Martin Luther King, just somebody who had a fascinating life and everything that went on with him, and then Bobby Kennedy would be somebody I'd like to have, particularly now, and talk about what his son's up to. Um, and those I think would be great people to talk to. And then probably someone like Eleanor Roosevelt, who just was probably she gets a lot of notoriety, but a lot of the work she did behind the scenes, and even after FDR passed away, I think it would just be fascinating to hear her story. But have the proverbial dinner conversation with a group of people like that would be really fun.
That's neat. And also to imagine in that scenario where the conversation might go with all of them together. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, and in doing that, it'd be great, if you could bring these people back in some way and say, okay, we're going to take a week and we're just going to go around, meet people, and see what's going on in the world today, and then sit down and based on what you were doing when, kind of talk about how much of this is the same or different, or just to get that kind of perspective and what their reactions to the world would be kind of fun.
That's a great segue into my next section on technology. What technology could you not live without?
Well, the easy answer is your cell phone, just because do you know anyone who still has a landline kind of thing anymore? They've become our walking computers. Just for a lot of very pragmatic reasons, not having a cell phone and the ability to connect with people would be really tough to deal with. I could put up with no TV because I could always listen to the radio. They're just such an important part of our life. It'd be hard to give them up. But a lot of other things we could do. And it's great because now it's so much easier to stay connected with people no matter where they were at. When I have a son and his family living in DC now. Back in the day, it was only call on Sunday because that's when the telephone rates went down, or write a letter. Now you drop somebody a text, a video, FaceTime them. That's just
boom, it's right there. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about, is there a future technology that you would wish for, that you would hope for, that you would like to see?
Oh gosh. Yeah. You know what? I think, the internet's all been a great thing, and it's just, helped a lot out, but I think we've all seen that there's been some things that have come out of that experience that are probably less than ideal, all the scamming and crazy stuff that goes on in deep, dark recesses of that. Not to be a fear monger or Luddite, but, I hope that with artificial intelligence, we can find a way to do it that minimizes the ability for others to manipulate or influence or change our lives in ways we don't really want to have happen. So to me, it's more. I think we ought to advance and have great technology, but I hope we can do one with some learning from what we've
learn from the past.
Yeah, learn from the past.
What concept?
Yeah. Gee. And again, it's not that everything went wrong, but there's always a little something that doesn't quite go the way you would have envisioned, and it'd be great if we could apply some of those lessons learned to AI.
Amen. What about sports? Do you have a favorite sport or game that you like?
Oh well, I'm a baseball nut. I can remember a little kid being taught how to read the box scores and collecting baseball cards. So played a little bit of baseball growing up. Made a joke to people, said, "Oh, why didn't you pursue that?" I said, "Well, you've heard the old adage, can't hit a curveball." problem I had is I couldn't hit a fastball, a changeup, or a slider, or a curveball. But I like baseball, played some football, so those are my probably top sports. Like this, with March Madness just getting done, that's always a good time to get into college basketball. Really enjoyed watching some of the WNBA and some of the women's sports actually starting to take off and get some variety.
Yeah.
But yeah, football and baseball are probably the top two.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned kind of very briefly reliving some of your past. What was your favorite age to be, and would you return there if you could?
Oh, what was my favorite age? Yeah, boy, every time I hit a new decade, you kind of look back and think, which one was the best one? Uh, you know, I I would say late 40s, early 50s was. I mean, there were some personal challenges that went on there, some health issues in the family, and some losses and whatnot that were kind of tough. But some of that I wish to redo over. But I'm kind of a person. I don't try to look back too much and regret. Live a life of
Hmm.
regrets, kind of thing, too much, but more be reflective and think, okay, if I had that to do over and found a different circumstance, how would I deal with it differently? But kind of that midlife area was probably the sweet spot of everything, where you're not in the awkward high schooly, kind of age, but you're not. You're still able to move and get around without much
Good,
pain.
good balance there. Yeah,
My
yeah.
life changed when I blew my first knee out at age 40. After that, everything was downhill.
If you could meet a 10-year-old you, what would you tell him?
Wow. Uh, Take more time to learn better, and just, uh, don't rush through everything so quick. Enjoy the moments for what they give you each and every day. Find some pleasure in everything you do, and don't feel like you're racing to get somewhere quick.
Okay, all right. And do you have a favorite saying or quote?
Oh gosh, depends on, go back to your generational thing, Harry. Sometimes it would have been, in certain age, clean up your room might have been my favorite quote.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm a
all
firm
right.
believer in kind of do unto others as you would do unto me, kind of thing. That's, just be nice to people, be kind.
Mhm. That's cool. That's
I
cool.
used to tell people at the work, this has a little bit of a religious bent to it, but I always encourage staff, when I was in my professional, EPA career kind of thing. It's, let's just do the next best thing. Come in the next day and just try to get a little bit better every day, because we're learning all along. There's a lot of expectations put on us, but let's just try to be a little bit better than we were the day before. So that's probably a motto I've kind of followed quite a bit.
That's cool. That's cool. So, how do you define happiness, and have you found it?
Oh yeah, I mean, happiness is kind of just what I said. I mean, I tend to be a fairly reflective person, and so it's like, okay, could have I done that a little bit better? How can I improve on that? What can I do to help those around me a little bit? What experiences? Particularly now as I'm getting older, my kids are starting to have, got the first grandchild and all that stuff coming along. You just want to be there to support and help people as best you can.
Hmm. And if you weren't doing the EPA, the environmental stuff, what else might you be doing?
Well, I'll go back to early conversations, particularly with my mom. We were sitting around, and she was the one whose apron, I'd be in the kitchen behind her saying, "What are you making? How do you do that? I'd like to learn that." And so she was real good about, putting you up on a stool and making you get in and digging it in, which developed my enjoyment with cooking. And so, very early on, I wanted to go off to culinary school to learn how to be a chef and or baker. And my poor mother at the time was, I think, just aghast of thinking me going into the restaurant business. And she made a deal with me that if I went away to college and got a 4-year degree and decided after that that culinary school was what I wanted to do, then that was up to me. But you got to get a 4-year degree. Well, as we said at the onset of the show, I did that, got an internship, and 37 years later, retired from the EPA. So it was probably a good decision.
Time flies so quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that creative process.
What haven't I asked you that I should?
Well, I thought you were going to ask me my favorite kitchen tool.
Okay, tell me your favorite kitchen tool or
Yeah.
appliance.
Appliance. So it goes back to my mother and cooking. It's her cast iron skillet. I put a lot of thought into anticipating that question, just because it's a good cast iron skillet is something you need to have, and the fact that it's the one that, I mean, gosh, this thing's got to be 50 years old, and just still using it today to make meals for my family and kids and friends and people. It's kind of a little connection of that. So I was anticipating, based on some of your other shows, that I was going to get asked the kitchen appliance question. So I've been practicing that one. But
Hit me.
Yeah. Anyway, so not with the cast iron skillet, Harry. That'd be too tough. But yeah.
No. I'm not sure which would be harder, but probably the cast iron skillet.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming you get some very fond memories every time you grab that handle.
You do, and that's kind of the joy of doing those kind of things. The connecting to the people in the past. And being able to kind of remember what they taught you and what they're doing, and trying to pass it on to the next generation.
There you go. Is there now? It's your turn. Is there anything that you would like to ask of me?
Well, Harry, tell me about your guitars and your music. I mean, just kind of what really drove you to get into that. I mean, I just, again, admire people who have those kind of talents and skills, but, you've got quite the collection back there. And
I could go around and I could introduce you to each of them, because they all have their own name. They all have their own history.
Yeah.
But then we'd have to start digging into my closets and explain a few of those that I have as well. But I got into music. It's really funny because you never know what seeds you're planting with your kids, with your grandkids, whatever. And I don't remember the song, but I walked into a kitchen one time when my mom was sitting there along with some aunts and other women around the kitchen table, and I was singing this song. And my mom pulls me close and she says, "You sing so well. You sing so good." And I thought, oh, okay. And I believed her, okay? Notwithstanding what I've heard since then, but I always believed that. And so I play several instruments, and I just enjoy playing guitar. I sing, I perform at many public and private houses and things like that in the area. But guitar is a lot easier to carry than a piano.
Yeah.
And so there's different guitars for different uses. And maybe someday I'll do a meet the family kind of a thing.
There you go. That'd be fun. Yeah. One of the guitar players that I always liked, just because it was so unique, was, what was his name? Dwayne Eddy. He had the big twang kind of on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They each put their own personality into it. So, and if you ever want to learn guitar, check out I have several videos on my YouTube channel of lessons. And so,
cool.
I like to share, like you said, sharing with other people, and what goes around comes around in the end result. So, as in this, and I want to appreciate for you taking the time to visit with us today. Is there anything you'd like to let the audience know about, maybe an upcoming project or something that's going on that you want to promote?
Sure. Well, just, I mentioned a little bit before about my kind of passion for making sure we have a good, safe environment, and we continue to be protective of the environment and human health. We're getting close here to the Earth Day is coming up. I think the 22nd of April is officially the Earth Day. And I just encourage people to take time to learn more about what's going on in the environment around us. It's often said currently by some people that we have the healthiest air and water and land in the world. And we do have a pretty good, healthy environment, but there's a lot of threats still out there that need to be addressed. So as we get into Earth Day, Earth Week, Earth Month, Earth Year, just take time to learn about human health in the environment and what you can do to be a good steward of the world we live in.
Hey, thanks for watching Interesting People I Know. Follow us on your favorite podcast provider, and if you know someone interesting that I need to get to know, please drop me a line at harrynogginsmusic@gmail.com. Till next time.